Ladies and gentlemen, the goal in your life is not to figure out how to be comfortable in your mental prisons, but to realize that you have the keys to set yourself free. Everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and today I have a spectacular guest with us. Mitzi Perdue is here. Mitzi, welcome to the program.
Hey, what a joy to be with you. I just love your show, and I'm so honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. This is a real pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mitzi Perdue, her father started the Sheraton Hotel Empire. Her father started out with one hotel and built it into 400 hotels and became a legend in the industry. And then she also married Frank Perdue, who is the chicken king, the chicken empire of Perdue Chicken, and she became the queen, of the chicken empire. And then, on top of all of that, she also is an incredible, beautiful entrepreneur and philanthropist. She started her own company. She's one of the biggest grape wine sellers, or I think I'm saying that right?
That's good enough.
That make wine, in the country. And she's written several books, and she's a public speaker, and she's just incredible. So Mitzi, I'm so happy that you're here with us today.
Oh, thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely.
I'm eager to share whatever I can.
So we've talked a lot about some different stories, and I want other people, one of the reasons why I created this podcast is because I get the privilege of talking to some of the world's most mesmerizing people. And I always wish that when those secret conversations were going on, I could be a fly on the wall and I could hear what other people were talking about. And so I created this podcast so that I could bring my listeners and viewers in to these conversations. So I'd like to just start off by asking you to retell some of the stories that you told me when we first met. So why don't we start with how your father created the Sheraton Hotels?
I'd like nothing better, because when my father started, it was in the early 1930s, at the height of the Great Depression. And it has so many harmonics back to what's going on today. But in his case, he got into the hotel industry when everybody in the world was saying real estate and hotels and travel in general, they'll never recover. It's a disaster. And hotels were going bankrupt right and left. And so why would father get into this industry that everybody was terrified of? Well, he had a secret sauce. And it's one that I think applies as well today as it applied back, let's say, 1933. And I'd like to invite you, Tim, and our listeners or viewers to come back with me to 1933. And father has just bought a hotel. What does he do when he first takes possession of a hotel, knowing that in general hotels are going bankrupt like right and left, and the unemployment rate at that time, we're talking 1933, is 25%.
Wow.
The day he takes possession of a hotel, the first thing he does is he invites all the employees to come into the hotel ballroom. And there could easily be 400 people there. And he told me, because I asked him stories all the time, he told me that he understood that the people in that ballroom, that they were just a really demoralized group of people, because it would be very typical for somebody to take over a failing company to clean house, fire people. And the people in his audience probably, or how about certainly, were worried that they were going to be fired, worried that they'd be on the breadline. Because if there's 25% unemployment, you are not going to get another job. So father understood that. And the first words out of his mouth to his new employees was, I want every one of you to keep your job. I want you to keep your job because I believe in you. I know that you know this hotel better than anybody else on earth. And I know that you know your job better than anybody else on earth. And I want you to stay because together, my part of this is I'm going to give you the resources and the encouragement and the support to show the world just how good you are. And then he went on. He said, together, we're going to make this hotel the most popular hotel in the whole city. It's going to be the best served, the most financially stable. It's going to be an example to the rest of the whole city that things can turn around. Well, just imagine what it must have felt if you were in that audience, going from the depths of despair, how am I going to tell my spouse or my significant other that I've been fired, to, hey, there's somebody who believes in me and this hotel is going to make it. Well, that's the beginning of the story, and I'm probably monologuing too long, but there's a part 2 to the story.
Yes, please continue. I'm mesmerized already.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's part 1 of the story. Part 2 is what the employees experienced the next day. The very next day, they'd get to see, troops of like plumbers, electricians, decorators coming into the hotel, which in a way you'd predict because if a hotel's on the verge of bankruptcy, it's probably gone to seed and the carpets are stained and, just one way or the other, you have to put money into refurbishing it. But from my point of view, the important part of this story is these people who were trooping into the hotel to refurbish it, they didn't go to the areas that the public would ever see. No, they were going into the areas that only the employees would see, like the employee dining room, the employee lockers, the showers, the rickety old elevators. Father spent the first money in every hotel that he ever took over. He spent the first money on areas that would benefit the employees. So of course I asked him, why did you do that? And here comes what I take to be a point of wisdom that can count today just as much as it did, 90 years ago. And the point of wisdom is, he said, people live up to or down to your expectations. And I wanted to communicate to them, not just in words as I had the day before, but in actual actions, how important they were, how much I believed in them. And to repeat, people have a compulsion to live up to or down to your expectations. Well, that's part 2 of the story, that he was communicating in the most concrete way how important they were to him by spending the first money on recognizing their importance and making their living conditions better, spiffing them up. I mean, what a message if you're working for the hotel. But then, I, as his daughter, who was just extremely interested in how he built this hotel empire out of nothing, because he started with no employees, and at the time of his death, he employed 20,000. So as a little girl, I was forever asking him, how did you do it? And one of my questions was, you're standing up there the first day you've taken over a hotel, and you promised that they could all keep the job. How come you did that? Why not make them earn it in some way? This is my childish question. Mm-hmm. And his answer, and again, this is a point of wisdom that I think applies as much today in tough times as it did back then. And what he would answer, that question of why did you promise them they're keeping their jobs, is he said, if you want people to do things your way, if you want compliance, if you want influence, and maybe dare I use the word mesmerizing them, if you want people to do what you want, in his world, he told me that there are 3 major ways. I mean, there are probably a million, but there are 3 in his world. And the first one was intimidation. He could have stood up there in front of 400 employees or 800, however many it was, and he could have looked at them and he could have said, shape up or you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
Intimidation.
Old school leadership. That's the old school approach for so many people, not mesmerizing leaders like your father, but for so many.
Well, he explained what was wrong with the intimidation old school way. He said, the problem with intimidation is often you can get compliance. They'll do what you want, but they'll do it grudgingly. They'll never go the extra mile. You're not a team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in his world, there was a second way, bribery. He said, I could have stood up in front of them and I could have said, do a great job and there's a raise in it for you. Maybe there's bonuses. But he said, that's better than intimidation, but it's still an ineffective way for a leader to approach getting compliance. He said the problem is it's too transactional. People will work for the bonus or the raise, but they're not going to work for something bigger. He said the way that he endorsed was inspire, don't require. Give people a better vision of themselves. He said that a person, imagine that you're a maid and you're making a bed. You could frame that job as I'm cleaning the room, I'm making the beds, or maybe I'm bartending or carrying suitcases, whatever I'm doing. I could look at it that way. And that's kind of a drudgery job and I got to do it for 8 hours because I need my paycheck. It's one way of framing it. But Father wanted to frame it as, we're going to have the best, most popular hotel in the city. We're going to be an example to everybody else that things can turn around. And by the way, they always did. So his view was inspire, don't require. And, one of his phrases, which I just love, is that a leader's job is to give people a better vision of themselves. And look where it took him. From an industry that was failing to one that was so successful that, again, at the time of his death, 400 hotels, 20,000 employees. So my summary of all of this is that I think these are timeless secrets of success. It's how you treat people, how you inspire them to go the extra mile. To me, that's the secret of Father's success.
Wow. 3 wows. Mitzi, that was amazing. Oh my gosh. That was a powerful story. Wow.
Would you allow me to have the fourth part of the story? Because I've told you 3 so far.
If there's 20 parts of this story, you just keep going.
Okay. I feel a little guilty about monologuing, but it's so
my
deep
listeners
in my
have
heart.
heard enough from me. They want to hear you.
Well, no, they tuned in to hear you, and so I'm feeling guilty, but oh well. Guilt doesn't stop me.
That's good for you. That's another lesson. Oh my gosh. I hope people are taking notes right now. We don't let guilt stop us. All right. So what's number 4 then?
Okay. I saved the best for last.
Okay.
The number 4 is Father in the 1930s, as far as I can tell, and I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I also studied management, and I even know what the theories were at that time. I mean, I have a master's in public administration. That's how interested I am in this whole subject of how he did it.
Yes.
At that time, there was something called Theory X, where you just demanded, and how was he able to completely, swim outside the river that everybody else was swimming in? And I think I know the answer. Huh. And the answer, and again, I hope this is useful to people, because he did something that was just so valuable that, anybody who chooses to emulate it, it might be useful to you. And here's what it is. The story that I just told about how he would inspire the people who worked for him, you would think that comes from just extraordinary understanding of human nature and instinctive just grasping of what people were all about. Well, I'm going to go with extraordinary understanding of human nature, but it was so far from instinctive. I mean, you could see the curvature of the universe from the distance that it is from how he started out. how he started out, and this is a story that's told over and over again in my family, in the Henderson family. When he and my mother got engaged, he was 26 years old. And mother, who was, a Southern belle from West Virginia, came east to Cambridge, Massachusetts to meet her future in-laws. And his mother, grandmother Berta, told my mother, don't marry Ernest. He can never keep a job. He can never stick to anything. You're going to end up poor. Well, mother said, I don't care. I love him. And they married. But how about a wake-up call for anybody to have your own mother say that your family's going to end up poor? And by the way, I think you know the rest of this story. We didn't end up poor. But how did he change from somebody who was could never stick to anything and seemed like the world's worst marriage prospect? Well, a wake-up call. He went to the equivalent of the Yellow Pages back, because we're talking, if he was 26, we're talking mid-1920s. Mm-hmm. He looked up career guidance counselor, and he found the name Johnson O'Connor, which has since become a very famous and respected, and I love them all, career guidance counselors. And Father talked to Johnson O'Connor himself. And Johnson O'Connor, after a day of testing Father, said, Mr. Henderson, you're clearly a very bright young man, and you've got a scientific bent, but you also have the worst human relations skills I've ever come across. In today's language, he was telling him that he sucked. The worst that Johnson O'Connor had ever come across. And Johnson O'Connor said, you could have a very successful career as a scientist in a laboratory where you didn't interact with anybody, because you're smart, but you are the worst I've ever come across. Well, Father took this as a challenge. First as a challenge, but second of all, he had figured out that whatever success you have in life, how about most of it comes from your ability to interact with people? Maybe to sell them your ideas, maybe to quote you, to mesmerize them, to persuade them to have your personality work with them. Father took this as a challenge. He began reading books, everything that he could on human nature. I know that he read the book, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. I bet he read it a dozen times. Mm-hmm. He also took courses in salesmanship, in public speaking. He'd attend lectures, conferences, magazine articles. He did everything he humanly could to crack the code of how to get along with people. And the end result of that was, when he was tackling the question of how do you get a hotel that's failing to blossom, he probably had more understanding of human nature and what motivates people than any of his peers. And that led him to try things that nobody else did. He understood, like one of the things that I just thought was so great about his approach to talking with his employees the first day that he met them. He didn't ramble on about visions of the future to begin with. He knew that they wouldn't hear a word he's saying unless he reassured them right from the beginning that they're keeping their jobs. And once, their biggest pain point is taken care of, they'll listen. But he understood that. But somebody who hadn't put a decade into studying human nature probably didn't know that. Isn't it cool that somebody, his worst deficit became his greatest asset?
Oh, yeah, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. So, I remember I got swats when I was in school as a fourth grader. These grown men were hitting me with boards because I talked too much. And now I get paid a whole lot of money to talk too much. So I love that. Yeah, there's so much wisdom in there. And, I have a lot of clients who are presidents of, very successful tech companies, or people that are very, very savvy with business. And they try to paint that vision and have everybody else come along with them, but it's their vision is what excites them. And most of the time, the people that are working for them have a different vision or a smaller vision, or they're much more, how am I going to be impacted? And am I going to be safe? Am I going to be okay? And your father recognized that and spoke, instead of making it about his vision for what he wanted, he made it our vision.
Yes,
and here's the first part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it just, well, I was going to say it's mystifying that he could understand so much that we understand today, but it isn't mystifying because he studied it. Right. I mean, and he actually made it a lifetime quest, because even like in the 1950s, the 1960s, by which time he was super successful, but we would still have house guests who were famous psychologists and psychiatrists. I mean, B.F. Skinner is something of a legend today. He was a Harvard professor who was just, full of insights. But Father made friends with him and had him, he was a weekend guest at our house over and over again. And Father and he would just be talking psychology. And the same with Eddie Bernays, I think is known, he was a psychologist, but I think he was known as the father of modern advertising. Actually, probably dozen fathers of modern advertising. But in any case, okay, certainly one of them. And Father and Eddie Bernays would just always be talking about what motivates people, what makes human beings tick. And, look how far that knowledge took him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary. So let's review a little bit, because there are so many golden nuggets in what you just said. It's just extraordinary. So he went through life believing in people. He had to learn how to do that, right? He had to go. A lot of times people are talking about the success secrets. The word secret is such a, savvy marketing tool that people use secrets for everything, right? But there aren't any secrets. The books, the audio programs, they're around, they're available. The people that I know that are the most successful, I modeled them when I was 18 and didn't have any money. I went to the library and I would borrow stacks of audiobooks, and I would put them in my Walkman, and I would walk around the block, and listen for hours and hours. I've listened to thousands of audiobooks and gained that, the wisdom. My son has that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I thought, what's one book that I could put on my son's dresser so he could look at that and learn from the most? And I chose that one from Dale Carnegie. And we were talking about it just yesterday, about really? How he's starting to understand and see in his life how these things are working out, because he said that I have this one friend that I was really, I got really interested. He was very good at playing piano, and I got really interested in how he learned that. And I got really interested in him. And he said, all of a sudden, he got really interested in me. And I didn't know how we became friends so quickly until I started reading the Dale Carnegie book. And then it made sense. I'm like, oh, Max, you're getting it. His name's Maximus. I said, you're getting it, right? You're really understanding now the power of this. So your father had the ability to help people see a better vision of themselves, which I just love that, and believe in them and inspire, don't acquire. I mean, so many things that you said make people feel like they're a part of something special, and they'll give you that discretionary effort because they want to, because they feel like, it meets their needs for contribution, right? And for significance and for love and connection. So beautiful. I love all of this. Wow. So that was your father's world. And then you meet Frank. So tell us a little bit about Frank Perdue.
Well, he was my hero from beginning to end. We were married 17 years until his passing. But, he had so many attitudes that were similar to my father's. Like, if you were to ask him the secret of his success, he would just right off tell you the people who work with me. And he really believed that. And he had a whole lot of sayings on that subject, such as, none of us is as smart as all of us. And I have a story that tells something about me, but a lot about Frank. And it's what happened when we first married. And to my mind, it shows that in their distinct ways, that Father and Frank Perdue both put so much effort on appreciating the people who worked with them. And by the way, I'm very careful to say work with them rather than for them, because that's how they both felt.
Yes.
But Frank was just very articulate about saying, no, it's the people who work with me. No way in the world could I have done it on my own. But I, as his wife, and as the daughter of the Sheraton person, and as a writer by trade, I'm forever asking Frank, like every second, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And I'm taking notes. And it was just so fun to be a writer and married to somebody who was just so great. But what I want to share with you that I think kind of shows a similarity between the two. When we first got married, and we're talking 1988, and we'd just gotten back from our honeymoon, and we're walking on a beach in Watch Hill, Rhode Island. It's the end of the season. We're carrying our sandals, and it's romantic. And suddenly I look up at my dear husband and I say, Frank, I think we ought to entertain every single person who works for the company in our home. And well, that took him aback, because 16,000 people in your company.
Oh my.
Well, and so, he's totally, no, that's 16,000 people. That's way too many. And we had a sort of joking relationship. So I kind of pretended that he wasn't saying no. And I said, I think we could start in 6 weeks. No, that's way too many. And let's have 100 at a time. No, no. And I think we should start with the secretaries, because they can tell everybody that our parties are fun and not scary. And, we went round and round with him saying no and me just sort of barging ahead. But as we continued to talk about it, his attitude, from what began to change to maybe there's something to it. And in the end, he said, I like it. And 6 weeks later, we did begin entertaining people 100 at a time, 3 times a month. And it did start with the secretaries, and it continued with, how about every category that you can think of: veterinarians, auditors, truckers, sanitation people, just everybody. And at these parties, and we're now coming to the part where I felt that he was a lot like my late father, Frank accepted the idea of something that was just so far out of his comfort zone of the entertaining people in our home, hospitality, 100 at a time. That was way outside his comfort zone, but he also had almost a lifetime quest for making the people whom he interacted with feel important. And the reason that he accepted my wacko idea was that this was yet one more way of communicating to people that they're important to them, to him. And at these parties, I used to notice with just fascination that whoever he was talking with, that person, and he'd make a point of talking with every single person in the room. And for the few moments when you were the center of his intention, you probably felt that his entire universe revolved around you. And he wasn't talking a whole lot. He was asking you questions. And I was noticing throughout his life that he made a practice of something that I aspire to and fail at. And that is, he would regularly listen 90% of the time and talk only 10% of the time. So when you were with him, you felt really important. Then when it came to the meal part, because this was for dinner, we had our living room with a great big buffet table. I'm going to guess it might be 30 feet long to accommodate 100 people. And he would stand behind the buffet table serving his employees. I mean, is that not cool that somebody, at the beginning, he employed 16,000, at the end 20,000, but here he is waiting on them, serving them. And then something else that I just thought, in Frank's case, it might have been more instinctive than in my father's case, but he would stand up in front of, in this case, 100 people, and he'd report to them what was going on in the company, and he'd tell the wonderful things, the new breed is doing spectacularly, or the new factory is operating at peak, or the bad news that whatever it was, like, I can't think off the top of my head what bad news was, but trust me that in any business there's bad news. So he would be telling them as if he was reporting to the board of directors. Mm-hmm. And so they would have inside knowledge of the company that they're working for. And doesn't that increase employee engagement?
Oh, yes, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. And then they could ask him questions. So, a trucker could ask him some question about weigh loads or something. And since he was totally on top of his game, he could give information about the latest laws and regulations and its impact in the company, and just 100 things in great detail. And again, to be able to ask the head of the whole company what's burning on your mind, and probably burning on on the minds of everybody else. And then at the end of the evening, he would end his talk with some version of what I'm about to paraphrase, which is, he'd thank them. He'd say, I know the company wouldn't be what it is today without each of you, and I thank you. And again, what must that mean to an employee or associate in Perdue speak, to have the head of the whole company have this person in his home thanking him? Woohoo!
Yeah. This is profound wisdom. In the 2010, 2020, in this new era that we're in, there's a lot of books about servant leadership, and there's a lot of books written by like military leaders who will talk about the importance of serving the people that you're in charge of, instead of just thinking that they're there to serve you. And your father and Frank were trendsetters. They were doing this before it became, pop culture. And
1988 for Frank, which is when we started.
Yeah, way, way before anybody else was doing it. I've had the pleasure of working with companies where I walk in there and they are not transparent. Only the people in the C-suite know what's really going on, and everybody else from the top down has their own story, which creates all kinds of gossip and stress, and it distracts people and it lowers productivity. And the people in charge are the cause of it, even though they think it's their employees don't care. Then, it's self-deception at its best. And then there's other companies where they decide to become completely transparent and just share everything. And they're scared, and at first people are unsure, and some people are complaining, but those people are always going to complain. But what happens is they become stronger and they're more powerful, and the culture becomes even more powerful than it was before, because of the honesty, because you're treating, employees or associates as human beings and adults instead of treating them like children. It's so powerful. And everything you're saying is gold. It really is gold. You want to be an influencer of people.
Well, something else that he did, and again, this is a case of please do as I say and not as I do, because although I aspire to what I'm describing, I don't get there, but I try. But here's what Frank was just miraculous about, and his son Jim is equally good. They knew thousands and thousands of names of the people who worked with them. And as an example, we frequently would go through factories or processing facilities. And I love doing this because I just admire machinery and technology and production and producing things. It turns me on. I love it. So for me, it was a huge privilege to accompany him through processing facilities. But there were several things that I witnessed in him that I consider amazing. And among them, person after person, Frank would say, Mitzi, I'd like you to meet Delcy. Delcy's son just got into college. Or meet Anthony. Anthony, he's had 30 years without a sick day of sick leave. And, the number of names that he knew of people. And then another thing that I just cherished, which is when he'd be walking through and he'd ask people how they were doing, and you being treated right, and just, things that acknowledge them as individuals. But what I loved is it would have been so easy for Frank just to march through with his nose in the air. I'm the owner, I'm the boss. Mm-hmm. No, I would notice his body language. You know, it's not kind of puffed out. It was more sort of like, I'm a fellow teammate, that we're, you know, we each have our jobs on this team, but I have all the respect in the world for what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. It was almost as if he was, I don't know if I'm exaggerating or not, but it felt as if he was ego-free, as if he was just, you know, we're a team and we're doing this together and we're creating something spectacular. We're helping provide very good food for people. I mean, we're doing something really essential and important.
Yeah. Yeah. You're feeding the world. And yeah, I call that others focused, right? We all start off self-focused, right? It's all about us and if we're okay and what we need and what our goals are and what we're frustrated about. And then there's a few that do the work and put their ego aside. Nobody's perfect. So, but we're always, like you say, we're striving to be the best that we can be in any situation. And, you know, Frank really is so impressive in his ability to be others focused and to, to memorize people's names. And the best way to memorize their names is to learn their story and get to know them. And that's really, as a leader, your job is to empower your people, right? Not to get the to-do list done. You know, as the top leader, as a CEO or president of a company, you really are in charge of the vision and keeping your people inspired. That's what leadership is really all about. And we get caught up in the to-do lists and our checklists, and it makes us transactional, where when you're taking care of helping people feel special and valued, then you're transformational. You know, and that's how your father learned to be. That's how Frank was. That's how you are as well. And so, and I love the fact that, I mean, you're very successful in your own right. You're a graduate of Harvard University, of George Washington University. You're a syndicated columnist for 22 years. You've written several wonderful books, right? And I mean, just all kinds of really amazing accomplishments within your own right. And yet you spend your time talking about these other people in your life, right? And that imbues, you know, being others focused. That you're modeling it. You're not doing it intentionally. Well, you've probably taught yourself to do it intentionally, but that wasn't how you were thinking. This is just who you are. You're as transformational as they were. And now you continue to keep their message and their values alive in the work that you do, because it's all about, hey, we need to keep loving each other. We need to keep respecting each other. We need to keep taking care of each other. And even if it's just remembering somebody's name, they say your favorite word is your own first name, right?
By the way, Frank, like my father, both took the Dale Carnegie course and both loved the book. And Frank also made the course available to top management at Perdue. So he was totally on board with the idea that that you learn people's names, you make them feel important. And you caused me to think of something else that Frank did, where there was I think it benefited him because it benefited his soul, but I don't see that it would ever contribute to the company's bottom line. So there was nothing transactional about what I'm about to describe, mm-hmm. which is how we spent our weekends, particularly our Saturdays. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to guess that the average person on Saturdays, maybe they're doing errands, maybe they're watching the games, who knows? But here's how Frank and I would spend at least our Saturday afternoons. We had a list from his administrative assistant, her name was Elaine Barnes, just to give us a list of people or associates who are in the hospital. And when you're employing 20,000 people, just by the law of averages, there will be some people in the hospital. And we used to column them. And, you know, how great must it feel for somebody, you know, fairly low down in the hierarchy, I mean, at any level, to have, and there would often be as many as 10 in the hospital, maybe it's flu season or something. And we would go by and call on each one. And, you know, how great is that? But then imagine that that there are very few people that day in the hospital, maybe it's 2 or something, and we still have a couple of hours left over, we would go out and visit retirees.
Wow.
Because he felt, you don't stop being important to me just because you're retired. No, what you've done, you are important. And I always felt that Frank was one of the greatest egalitarians that I'll ever come across. Because something else, I just wonder how many heads of Fortune 500 size companies would do what I'm about to describe. Each plant has a cafeteria. And Frank would regularly eat in company cafeterias. And sometimes I'd get to join him and I'd get to watch. And he'd sit down and pretty soon, sometimes he might join an existing group, or sometimes he'd sit down and people knew that they could come up and sit beside him and just talk about what's going on. And I mean, the realism that would give him of what's going on. I mean, it's not perfect realism, but he sure knows a lot more when he's sitting down and talking with 3 or 4 associates and asking how they're doing than he would be if he was at some great big expensive restaurant, which he could surely afford.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd recommend that to anybody who's part of a large company. Eat in the company cafeteria and get to meet people. And even I used to do that. And some of the best adventures of my life kind of comes from eating in the company cafeterias. And I hope you're about to ask, gee, Mitzi, tell me one.
Yeah. Yes. Please.
We have a plant in Accomack, Virginia, and it's about, it's maybe a 90-minute drive from here. And one day I was coming back from traveling, but along the way, the stop that was nearest around lunchtime was Accomack. So I go into the cafeteria, and I sit beside this wonderful African-American lady, mm-hmm. and we get to talking. Mm-hmm. And, she's just really curious about what my life is like. And I have no secret. So I tell her, anything that she wanted to know, like what Frank was like at home. And mm-hmm. I thought he was great. But, mm-hmm. I'm busy answering her questions. But then I think, turnabout's fair play. And I began asking her about her life.
Yes.
And one of the things, this was early on in Frank's and my marriage, so I would have known the answer if it had been a few years later. But the question that I wanted to know is, and I hope and pray that I was really diplomatic and sort of in a roundabout way of getting to know the answer to the following question. And I did not just straight out ask it, but this is what I was getting at. Does it ever get boring doing the same thing day after day? Mm-hmm. And wouldn't you wonder that? What's it like? Say you're putting chickens, the same job after 15 or 20 years, how boring might it get? Mm-hmm. And again, please believe me, I'm not perfect, but I am diplomatic enough to know just, I didn't flat out ask it, but I did get at it. Mm-hmm. And her answer to my very roundabout question was, I love every day. Every day is exciting, but it would be hard for me to explain why. The only way you could really understand it is if you'd come to the plant and work side by side with me for an 8-hour shift. And I said, if you can arrange it, I'll do it.
Challenge accepted.
Because I really, really, really wanted to do it.
Sure, I believe you.
Okay, so she talked with her supervisor who, up the chain of command, it probably reached Frank by the time they gave me permission to do this, but they could be pretty sure that I wasn't going to sue them if something went wrong. So,
yes.
I mean, because I think an average person who isn't the owner's wife would not be allowed to go in the plant and do something. Yes. But nevertheless, a couple of days later, I'm in the plant and I'm suited up. It looks something like a space. I mean, there's hats, there's hair, there are hard hats, there's hair nets, you're just suited up so that everything's safe, so that the food is kept as pure and safe as possible. Mm-hmm. So there I am, and I'm standing beside my new friend, and our job is to put chickens in, there's a conveyor belt, and you attach them to the conveyor belt, and it's moving. Mm-hmm. And first of all, for the end of my life, I'll have enormous respect for the people who do this because it looks so easy. But how about in 8 hours, I never got it right. And that meant just an enormous amount of laughter from the people up and down the line because they had to fill in for me.
But I bet they loved it that you were there.
Well, here's what I discovered and had never anticipated. And if you haven't done it, I think it would be surprising to you. There wasn't 1 second that was boring because there was just endless chatter. There was chatter about boyfriends, girlfriends, TV shows, what celebrity figures were up to. I mean, there was, and just endless amounts of joking. Mm-hmm. And in my case, since I couldn't even get one leg where it was supposed to be, the guy who was standing beside me, he could put 2 in when I couldn't, no, 2 legs in. He could put 4 in at a time when I couldn't get 1. Wow. And, I mean, it was just, I mean, we were almost collapsing on the floor with laughter that, and so, you know, at the end, I was a total believer that she was telling me the truth, that it wasn't boring. Oh, she said one of the things that if you're a plant manager or whatever level this decision gets made, I guess human resources, that they put extreme effort into having people who will like each other beside each other. So you're probably not going to be put next to somebody who's an opposite personality type. But if, I mean, maybe I saw it at its absolute best, but I was impressed.
You know, that's, again, there's so much wisdom in this, from the fact that you were in there, you know, and kind of proverbially getting your hands dirty, right? You know, you were definitely there, and created camaraderie and respect and impressed everybody and created that friendship. And then, you know,
well,
and then
trust me, I didn't impress them with, I mean, I figured I was worth exactly what they were paying me.
But even that, you know, deprecating humor and stuff, you know, it's the humility that you have and everything. I love it. And then the other, you know, golden nugget of how people, you know, put people together that they enjoy working with each other. It makes you more productive. You know, a complaint that I hear consistently, where no matter what company I'm at or what organization I'm talking to, you know, how do you deal with a negative boss or a negative coworker? You know, they talk about that all the time. And so the fact that you're even putting similar personalities together, you know, is just a savvy insight that maybe people might not catch. But, you know, I think that was really smart. You know, they're doing so many things well. It's truly.
By the way, I'm suddenly getting cold feet about the story that I just told, which is I'm telling you it to the best of my ability, exactly as it occurred to me. But yeah. I can't know that every processing facility would be like that. I mean, that was my experience. Somebody else might have a drastically different experience, but that, I mean, I'm telling you what I saw and felt.
Well, and I love it because it gives an example of what to strive for. When people feel like they have their work family and they go in and they're telling jokes and they support each other and they're so good at what they do and they feel appreciated by that. And then this woman has this conversation, you know, with, you know, the owner of the company pretty much. Right. And then, you know, and she says, can I come to work with you and then learn about it? I mean, I don't know how many people would, I mean, we could probably count them on our hand, maybe how many people would actually do what you did. Right. And that speaks volumes because people, as you know, they don't do what you say. They don't watch what you say. They watch what you do, you know, and you got in there and did something amazing. You know, that's a legendary story for anybody working in that facility. Oh, did we ever tell you one time we had Mitzi Perdue working on the line? She couldn't get one chicken in there.
Right.
But they adore you for it.
But that brings me up to something that Frank used to say, mm-hmm. which is that being self-deprecating is just a really good, I'm trying to think, to do absolute justice to his saying, but that it's just good to be self-deprecating, that it's attractive, that And I'll give you an example of something that he used to coach me on. His feeling was that people want to be important. Mm-hmm. And like, I remember once I was talking with a group and I happened to mention a trip to Europe, and he coached me afterwards. Don't do that, because if you've done things that they'll never do, it makes them feel less important. Mm-hmm. It's far better to focus on what they do, and don't ever boast about what you've done. And so I learned not to talk about fabulous parties that I'd been to or fabulous trips, because when you talk about how wonderful you are, it can make the other person feel less important. And mm-hmm. there's a quote that just so much applies to Frank, and it's from William James, the great psychiatrist from 1900, mm-hmm. or that era. Mm-hmm. And it was, the deepest principle of human nature is the craving for appreciation. Mm. So they want to be appreciated. It's not about you and I went on this wonderful trip, it's about them, not about you.
That's so beautiful. So I don't know if I told you this story. I'll make it really fast. But there was a woman in a high-powered position, and she needed to fill a vice president slot. And so she had narrowed it down to two gentlemen. So she invited them over both for a meeting. She sat down with the first gentleman and she said, "Tell me about yourself." And he went on to talk about all his accomplishments, all the things he had done, all the adventures he had been on. By the end of that conversation, she was convinced that he was one of the most amazing people she ever met. Then she interviewed the second person. The second person came in. She said, "Tell me about yourself." He said, and he started talking about the things that he's done and his accomplishments. But then he asked how she had got to where she was, and how, the accomplishments that she had and all the things that she had done, and how impressed he was with her. And she started talking more about her journey. And by the end of the conversation, she was convinced that she was one of the most amazing people she had ever met. Who do you think she hired? Right? Gentleman number two.
Yes.
So again, you're right. It's I love William James, the desire for appreciation. He always said the greatest discovery of the 20th century is that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your thinking and the quality of the questions that you ask, not just of yourself, but to others as well. So let me just balance this real quick with the self-deprecating, because it's perfectly fine to talk about the Washington parties you've been on, the celebrities you've hung out with, the people that you've done. If you're talking to other people that have had similar experiences, or if you're talking to people who are inspired by that and would like to have those experiences. But you're right. Many more people feel small instead of tall when, if they feel like that's not possible for them. And that's just, a lot of it is limited thinking. So I think it's really valuable and important to make sure that you feel good about yourself. But if you are in a powerful position, talking about your failures, talking about the mistakes that you've made, poking fun at yourself really is a charming characteristic, because a lot of people in those positions are only talking about how fabulous they are. They're making themselves important. They're not focusing on helping those around them feel important. And that's what the best communicators do, the best influencers. They walk around, I have my acronym LOVE, LUV. They walk around loving people, listen to, understand, and validate, right? And when you walk around validating and loving on people, then they really, they hold you in high esteem. So, wow. So let me ask you a couple of questions, because this has just been absolutely outstanding.
Oh, thank you.
I want you to tell everybody that's with us right now the story that you talked about with Napoleon Bonaparte and Mother Teresa, because I loved it. So I want you to share it again, please.
Okay. Actually, it's from a book that I just wrote with Mark Victor Hansen, How to Be Up and Down Times. Let's see if I can hold it straight up.
That is an absolutely awesome book. Everybody should go on Amazon right now and order your copy of it, because it is spectacular. You have a sense of who Mitzi is just by the extraordinary stories that she's already shared. And Mark Victor was just on our program, and he's extraordinary as well. You put those two together, and so order your copy now. All right. So tell us that story that's out of that book.
This story is, by a huge coincidence, a few years ago, I read in the same week a biography of Napoleon, the great emperor of France.
Mm-hmm.
And I also read a story about Mother Teresa. And Napoleon, good Lord, back in the 1800s, early 1800s, he was pretty much the emperor of the Western world. I mean, he owned more territory, he had more money, more castles, palaces, women, just all the status and the goodies that the world has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Mother Teresa, in contrast, the only possessions that she personally owned were 3 cotton saris, the robe that an Indian lady might wear,
Mm-hmm.
and the sandals on her feet. She had a vow of poverty and a vow of humility. I mean, could you get 2 characters that would be more opposite? Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France, Mother Teresa, Catholic nun. So who had a happier life? And we don't have to guess, because Napoleon, writing in his diary in exile on an island in the Pacific, he wrote, looking back in his life, that he couldn't name 5 happy days. All the wealth, power, status, fame, women, they didn't lead to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
What about Mother Teresa? Mother Teresa wrote, when asked about her life of poverty and humility, she wrote, "My life has been a feast of unending joy." Mm-hmm. Now, which is better? Napoleon, the taker, everything that he had, he got by pretty much stealing and robbing from people. He couldn't name 5 happy days. Maybe he could have named 4, but he didn't have 5. Yeah. Mother Teresa, a feast of unending joy.
Yeah. Whew. I love that story, and I love how you tell it. I mean, it's just so powerful. Money is one of the biggest sources of stress in people's life. And living in America, the message is you never have enough. And now we have unemployment rates that are approaching the same as the 1930s and the Great Depression, and suicide levels are spiking, and anxiety was sky high before COVID-19 and the coronavirus. And now it's just, people are scared and stressed more than ever before. And all the advice that you're giving, all the insights, all the golden nuggets is something that we all have access to, right? You're not talking about money at all. You're talking about how you spend your time and how you help people feel, how you help people feel about yourself, and how you help people feel about, how do I say this? How good you make yourself feel and how good you make others feel. And you really got to start by making yourself feel loved and appreciated. You got to fill your own cup up so that you can then take that cup and fill everybody else's cup up through the day. But you got to fill your own up first, right? Yeah.
I'm a passionate believer in that. And actually there are 40 tips in this book. And one of them is, it's what I call respite. And somebody else might call it escapism, but I'll tell the story behind a piece of advice that I have, which is that for at least an hour a day, give yourself some kind of respite where, I don't think we can, underestimate or overestimate the amount of stress that goes on when there's a pandemic? Between financial and relationships. I have a sister and a cousin, both who had COVID-19. And when you're worried if your sister, who's 92 years old, is going to make it, it's stress. Mm-hmm. So here's the piece of advice that I have. Maybe I'll tell the background of the advice first. I have a niece who runs a nursing home. And she said that 1/3 of caregivers for serious illness like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, 1/3 of the caregivers die before the people that they're caring for. She said, why does that happen? And she says, because stress takes such a toll on your body. And she said, for people under stress, the most important thing that they can do is, in one way or another, and I'm going to call it respite, but it could also be escape, do something that takes your mind off of it. And one of the easiest ways, at least for me, and maybe for lots of all of us, is YouTube. I mean, there are all these things where you can lose yourself. Or how about a great movie that you love?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are things that when you're absolutely enmeshed in them, you're not thinking, how am I going to pay the rent? If you can get something that gets your mind off of whatever it is, and maybe it's talking with your grandchildren on FaceTime or something, but something where you give yourself permission to just turn it off in any way that works. I mean, maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's, there are all these wonderful YouTube things of animals, cute animals being rescued and happy, or, you know, just for at least an hour a day, turn off those stress hormones that are just undermining your health. And I've talked with, golly, it could be you, but I've talked with experts in this field who say that one of the most important things you can do is, you know, you've expressed it as filling the cup up, but it also give a chance just to get yourself back together again, because who can endure unending, unremitting stress? You have to, as a matter of health, do something. And I don't know what it is for you, but whether it's exercise, pumping iron, or sewing a quilt, or whatever it is for you, give yourself permission to do, because it's one of the most important things you can do. Because what good are you to anybody else if you fall apart?
Sage advice, Mitzi, sage advice. It's not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity. You know, self-care is a necessity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Existential threat to your life if you don't. I mean, unending stress will create a breakdown. Yeah. The antidote is intermittent relief from that stress.
Yeah. Yeah. Through laughter, through love, through, you know, different things where you set a goal and you take action on it, even if it's just cleaning up the house a little bit, you know, or getting outside and, you know, pulling some weeds, planting some flowers, talking to the grandkids, listening to music, YouTube videos, meditation sessions. It's available.
Whatever works for you, do it. And my book has a whole bunch of suggestions on it, but by the time you're old enough to be listening to us right now, you probably know what a good escape is. Mm-hmm. Do it.
Yes, do it. Do it. That's there we are. Ladies and gentlemen, Mitzi Perdue. Mitzi, this has been absolutely outstanding. I've just, you know, I'm going to have you back on the program again.
I'd love nothing more. I'd be so honored.
Yes, you're a delight. And I'm so happy. The stories and the insights, I mean, just amazing. There's so much. I'm going to say it right here and now. This is the best customer service interview ever. I mean, you just had gold after gold after gold nugget for how to have influence and how to take care of people, how to grow a business and a life, and and how to take care of people, and that leads to great joy. And I can't thank you enough. So thank you so much for being on the program today.
Well, I'm so grateful to have been invited.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so everybody that's been watching and listening, holy cow, that was incredible. Mitzi had so many takeaways. It was just absolutely awesome. So here's what you need to do. You need to get on Amazon and get a copy of her book, How to Be Up in Down Times, with her and Mark Victor Hansen, because it's an extraordinary book. It's full of even more stories and 40 takeaways and stuff, practical advice you can use immediately. And you're getting it from one of the legends, one of America's royalty, right? And so definitely grab that and use it, and it'll make your life more mesmerizing. And then share this interview with your team leaders. If you are an employee and again, employees, we're all employees, right? It doesn't matter what our title is. What matters is that you're a part of a company or a part of an organization. So whatever role you might play in that, make sure that people that are making decisions within that company and within that culture are watching this interview, because it is powerful and it will supercharge your culture like nothing else can. So and then make sure you put a review and like this, and stay posted for the next episode. So thanks so much for watching. Mitzi and I really appreciate you. And, you know, we do this for you. So take what you've learned, apply it, and make your life mesmerizing. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody. Hey, would you like more free tips on how to be a mesmerizing leader? Then check out mesmerizingleadership.com and also hang out with me on Facebook, facebook.com/Tim Shurr. Thanks so much and make your day a sure success. Hey, it's Tim Shurr. Would you like to learn my best secrets for how to be mesmerizing? Then head over to www.survivingtothriving.me. That's www.survivingtothriving.me. I'll see you there.